Hungary, April 12, 41. A knight on the plains east of the Sajo River adjusts the chainmail across his shoulders. He has trained for this moment since he was 7 years old. His armor is worth more than a farmer earns in a decade. His warhorse, bred and trained for battle, costs more than some villages. He carries a lance, a sword, and a shield bearing his family's crest. Across the field, the Mongol riders look almost laughable. Small horses, leather armor, no lances, no heavy shields, just bows. The signal comes. He kicks his horse forward, lowering his lance. The ground shakes as hundreds of armored riders charge together. This is what European heavy cavalry does. They close the distance, they hit hard, they break the line. But the Mongol riders don't hold their ground. They scatter. And then the arrows start. The first one punches through his wooden shield and buries itself in his forearm. The second hits his horse in the neck. The animal screams and stumbles. He can hear arrows whistling past from directions he can't even see. Mongol riders are circling at full gallop, firing over their shoulders without even looking forward. His horse collapses beneath him. In 60 pounds of chainmail, he can barely stand. He is the most expensive soldier in Europe, and he is being killed by a weapon made from wood, animal bone, and fish glue. A weapon that took over a year to build, that cost almost nothing, and that was the single most devastating piece of military technology on Earth. If you love understanding the engineering behind history's deadliest weapons, subscribe. We do this every week. So how did armored European knights end up so completely outclassed? To understand that, you need to understand what they were. For roughly 500 years, the mounted knight was the dominant weapon system in European warfare, and calling a knight a weapon system is accurate because nothing about this was cheap or simple. A knight began training at age 7 as a page. By 14, he became a squire. By 21, if he survived, he earned his knighthood. That is over a decade of full-time combat training before he ever saw a real battlefield. The equipment was even more expensive. A full suit of chainmail with reinforcing plates could cost the equivalent of a small estate. The warhorse underneath him was a specially bred destrier, the medieval equivalent of a main battle tank. These animals were trained to charge directly into infantry formations, to kick and bite on command, to not flinch at the sound of clashing steel. A single destrier cost more than a peasant family's farm. Now multiply this by 1,000. An army of heavy cavalry was the single largest military investment any European kingdom could make. And for centuries, it worked. The doctrine was simple. Line up your knights, charge at full speed. The combined weight of armored men on armored horses hitting an infantry line at 30 miles per hour was devastating. Formations shattered, lines broke, battles ended in minutes. This approach defeated every major European army it faced. Heavy cavalry charges broke Viking shield walls, scattered light infantry across the fields of France, and dominated battlefields from the English Channel to the borders of the Byzantine Empire. Then European knights rode east and met the Mongols. The weapon that broke them doesn't look like much. Unstrung, a Mongol composite bow curves away from the archer in a shape that looks almost like a flattened letter C. It measures about 150 to 160 centimeters long. You could hold it in one hand. It weighs just a few pounds, but the engineering inside that small frame is extraordinary. The core of the bow is birch wood. Birch is flexible, resilient, and widely available across the Central Asian steppe. This wooden core gives the bow its basic shape and structure, but wood alone can only store so much energy before it snaps. That is where the other layers come in. On the belly of the bow, the side facing the archer, craftsmen glued strips of animal horn from mountain sheep, goats, or wild ungulates. Horn has an incredible resistance to compression. When the bow is drawn and the belly is squeezed inward, the horn absorbs that crushing force without cracking. On the back of the bow, the side facing away from the archer, they layered animal sinew, tendons from deer, moose, or mountain sheep, dried and beaten into loose fibers, then soaked in glue and carefully layered onto the wood. Sinew has extraordinary resistance to tension. When the bow is drawn and the back stretches outward, the sinew absorbs that pulling force without tearing. So now you have three materials working together. Wood provides shape. Horn resists being crushed. Sinew resists being stretched. When the archer draws the string, the horn compresses on one side, while the sinew stretches on the other. The bow stores enormous energy in both directions at once. And when the archer releases, all of that energy snaps forward into the arrow. The binding agent that holds all of this together is fish bladder glue. Derived from the swim bladders of freshwater fish, this adhesive is remarkably strong, flexible, and resistant to moisture. It outlasts modern epoxy resins. But here is the catch. Fish glue and the other organic glues used in composite bow construction require very specific conditions to cure properly. The horn must be glued in warm summer temperatures. The sinew layering works best in autumn. The final curing and drying happens through the cold of winter and into the following spring. Each step in the construction process has to happen during its correct season. This means a single composite bow takes a year to build, sometimes longer, and each one is handcrafted. There is no shortcut. You cannot rush the chemistry. And there is one more detail: the shape. Notice how the tips of the bow curve away from the archer even when strung. This is the recurve. When the string is drawn, those curved tips act as levers, multiplying the force stored in the limbs. The recurve adds significant energy at full draw without making the bow any larger. The result? A war bow with draw weights between 100 and 166 pounds, according to historian George Vernadsky. Effective lethal range beyond 200 meters, maximum range out to 450 meters, armor-piercing arrows that could punch through chainmail at combat distance, all from a weapon small enough to fire from the back of a galloping horse. For comparison, the English longbow could match some of those performance numbers, but the longbow is nearly 2 meters tall. It requires the archer to stand on the ground and brace with his full body weight to draw it. You cannot use a longbow from horseback. The composite bow delivered comparable or superior performance in a package less than half the size. But the bow alone did not defeat European knights. The Mongols built an entire military doctrine around it. Every Mongol child, boy or girl, learned to ride before they could walk and learned to shoot soon after. By the time a Mongol warrior joined the army, he had been shooting from horseback for most of his life. Each rider carried at least 2 bows into battle, a heavier one for long-range volleys and a lighter one for rapid shooting at close range, along with 60 or more arrows of different types. Some had broad tips for cutting through flesh. Others had narrow, hardened points for punching through armor. The signature tactic was the feigned retreat. Mongol light cavalry would engage the enemy, exchange a few volleys, then turn and ride away as if fleeing. European heavy cavalry, trained to charge and pursue, would take the bait every time. Knights on heavy war horses would chase the retreating Mongols for miles, spreading out their formation as faster horses pulled ahead of slower ones. Then the trap closed. The retreating Mongol riders would turn in their saddles and fire backward at full gallop. This is the Parthian shot, named after an even older tradition of steppe warfare. Arrows rained into the scattered, exhausted European cavalry from riders they thought were running away. Meanwhile, fresh Mongol units would swing around the flanks. The carousel tactic. Thousands of horse archers riding in a continuous circle around the enemy formation, pouring arrows from every direction. The Europeans could not charge because there was no fixed line to hit. They could not retreat because they were surrounded. They could not close to sword range because the Mongols were always moving. The charge and smash doctrine that had dominated Europe for 5 centuries was structurally broken against this system. The heavier and more expensive your cavalry, the worse it performed. The Mongols had found the counter. And the proof is in the battles. At the Kalka River in 1223, a coalition of Rus princes and Cuman cavalry marched out to meet a Mongol scouting force led by generals Jebe and Subutai. The Mongols feigned retreat for 9 straight days, stretching the coalition army across miles of open steppe. Then they turned and attacked. The Cuman cavalry broke first, crashing back through the Rus lines and creating chaos. The Mongols swept through the gap. Out of roughly 30,000 coalition soldiers, about 20,000 were killed. Mongol casualties were minimal. 18 years later, at the Battle of Mohi on the Hungarian plains, the pattern repeated on a far larger scale. King Bela, the fourth of Hungary, assembled an army that may have numbered up to 100,000 men, including the finest heavy cavalry in Europe. The Mongol generals Batu Khan and Subutai encircled the Hungarian camp at the Sajo River, then deliberately left one side open. The Hungarians fled through the gap, dropped their weapons and armor, and were slaughtered as they ran. Roughly 60,000 Hungarian soldiers died. The kingdom's military was destroyed in a single afternoon. 2 days before Mohi, at Legnica in Poland, a separate Mongol army had already annihilated an army of Polish and German knights using the same tactics. Same feigned retreat, same encirclement, same result. 3 battles, 3 European armies destroyed, same pattern every time. For 50 years, no European force found an answer. The Mongol composite bow made cavalry archers the dominant military force across the entire Eurasian landmass for centuries. No other weapon system would match its combination of range, power, mobility, and rate of fire until the development of reliable firearms hundreds of years later. But the legacy goes beyond warfare. The core engineering principle of the composite bow, storing maximum energy in minimum space by combining materials that resist opposite forces, is the same principle behind modern composite materials: carbon fiber, fiberglass, reinforced polymers. The wing of a commercial aircraft stores stress through layered materials, resisting tension and compression in exactly the same way a Mongol bow stores the energy of a drawn string. A carbon fiber Formula One chassis uses opposed material properties to absorb impact, just like horn and sinew absorb the force of a full draw. A weapon built from animal parts and fish glue on the Central Asian steppe in the 1200s used engineering logic that the modern world would not fully understand for another 800 years. Subscribe. Next week, we cover the fortress that held off the entire Mongol Empire for 5 years and the weapon that finally broke through its walls.